Hey everyone, welcome to the Being Patient podcast. I'm Deborah Kahn, founder of Being Patient. When my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, I decided to use my skills as a journalist in a different way. Frustrated by the lack of information on science and the inability to get different expert opinions, I decided to quit my job at the Wall Street Journal to create a better platform for people impacted by dementia. We are a community where news and information is created by our team of journalists. We ask tough questions and we simplify the science so that anyone can understand. We don't only cover disease, but delve into the latest research on what it takes to keep our brains healthy. We invite the experts and ask your questions. Here's today's podcast. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to Being Patient Perspectives. I'm Deborah Kahn, founder of Being Patient. Well, as many of you know, with the approval of the new monoclonal antibody drugs to treat Alzheimer's, many of you have been curious about the experience of taking those drugs. So today we thought we would talk to someone who has actually been in a MAB clinical trial. That's Bill Sasse, who's now joining us. Thank you so much for joining us, Bill. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Okay, let's start from your first journey seeking a clinical trial. We know a lot of, quite a number of these MAB drugs, called MAB because they're monoclonal antibody therapies, are being tested. Tell us how you found out about the trial and which one you were in.
Well, I found out about the trial through watching the TV special that Eli Lilly sponsored in 2015. It was all about the journey of Glen Campbell. He had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and they had agreed to do one final tour, and he and his family agreed to let the progress of the disease be documented throughout this tour. And it was originally planned for only 15 dates, but then it was so popular they played for about 120. And at the end, there was a solicitation for a drug trial of Eli Lilly's new Alzheimer's experimental drug, Solanezumab. And so I had some history in my family of dementia and Alzheimer's, my extended family, and more closely with my father and my grandmother. So I had never really thought about being in a drug trial, but after watching this, I thought maybe I should pursue it, and I couldn't come up with any good reasons not to, so I did.
So let me just interrupt you for a second. At that time,
yes.
had you been diagnosed? Were you experiencing cognitive difficulties? What stage were you at?
Well, I hadn't. I wasn't aware of any cognitive problems, and I didn't know anything about my personal situation. I just knew that I had some in the family, and I guess that thought was always kind of lingering back there that I may be faced with that someday myself.
How many family members had been diagnosed at that point with Alzheimer's?
Well, I don't know. My grandmother was one of 10 children, and I know several of those siblings suffered from dementia. Whether it was called Alzheimer's back then, I don't know. My grandmother, they called it hardening of the arteries. My father was diagnosed in 1992, and his symptoms were no different than my grandmother's and several of those others. So those were all 40, 50 years ago with the siblings. And so I think if they were today, they'd probably call it Alzheimer's. But at any rate, I knew that my father was diagnosed. And so Alzheimer's tends to run in some families more than others. And so I was a little concerned about it. I didn't worry about it. I didn't dwell on it, but it was always kind of back there.
So now with the monoclonal antibody therapies, they employ our immune systems or mimic, I should say, to attack the plaque, beta amyloid plaque. I'm assuming at that time you didn't know if you actually even had plaque in order to go on these therapies. Is that right?
I did not. I applied to volunteer to be screened, and that's where they determined there were several criteria for getting in the study itself, and had to be over 65. You had to have no symptoms or diagnosis, and went through a whole series of tests, cognitive tests, blood tests, CAT scans, MRIs. But the final test was a PET scan, where they actually determined if you had this elevated level of amyloid protein in your brain. And elevated meant that some plaques had begun to form. And that was the first time that I actually knew that I had plaque forming in my brain.
Do you mind if I ask how old you were at that point?
I was 69 at the time. The criteria, you had to be 65, and I was 69. I was retired.
So, I mean, that's pretty brave of you, Bill, because I think a lot of people are afraid, to understand that there may be that hallmark. Tell me a little bit about like how you found out and what was that like when you found out?
Well, after the PET scan, I think this entailed about 6 visits to the Indiana University Neuroscience Center in Indianapolis, and at the final visit after the PET scan, I met with the lead doctor and his nurse, and they said yes, that you did have the amyloid plaque in your brain and were an acceptable candidate for the trial. And so that didn't surprise me any based on my family history. I guess I would have been surprised if I didn't have any, but at any rate, I didn't really spend a lot of time thinking about it. Didn't weigh on me heavily or anything. I just said, yes, we need to do this.
So, how long, tell us a little bit. I think a lot of people are curious about this now. Like, what was the trial experience like for you? So you are confirmed that you do qualify. Um, and what happens next?
Well, then you start a regimen of monthly infusions, and there was some flexibility in that schedule to accommodate um, our any travel schedules that we might have. But any time between 3 weeks and 6 weeks, these things would be scheduled, and ultimately 12 per year. But so you start out initially. Every 4 months, I would have a series of cognitive tests to determine if there'd been any mental decline. And you know what those tests are like, identifying shapes and repeating things, stories and shapes and so forth, counting backwards by threes from 100 and between these tests. And that was all part of it. Every month I would get an infusion, and every 3 or 4 months I'd have this series of tests. I'd have an MRI probably every other year. I had a couple PET scans during the 7 years I was in that. But that's kind of how it went. Initially, there was the infusion actually took an hour to do, and then there was a 1 hour waiting period, and to see if there was any side effects. But after about 2 years or so, our nurse came in and said, "Yeah, I have a surprise today. There's no more waiting period." So that was a big deal. It cut our time in half. But my wife was my study partner. She went with me, and on the every 4 to 6 months when we would meet with the doctors, they would meet with her first and get her opinion of my condition. And then they would ask her some current events that we had done. And then I would meet with the doctor, and he would give me a series of cognitive tests. And and then asked me the same question about current events to see if my version agreed with hers, and it always did. So that was good. Um, I saw that doctor probably twice a year, and then every 4 months was the just a series with the administrative assistant of tests and so forth. And this was all done in Indianapolis at the IU Health Neuroscience Center.
Okay, and of course, we're getting a question in. This is from Daryl, who's asking, did you find that Solanezumab, if I said that right, was helpful? My wife was on the drug for 3 years and it seemed to work, and that was noticeable after the trial was stopped. Wait, before you answer that question, I have another question, which
Okay.
is, you weren't experiencing memory loss when you went into this trial, right? Were you having any cognitive issues?
None
So
whatsoever.
how do you determine whether or not the drug is working for someone like you if you didn't have cognitive issues? Daryl just shared with us that he really felt like it helped his wife. I'm presuming she was experiencing, she was showing symptoms. So what was it like for you? And did you feel like it was helping in any way?
I felt absolutely nothing. There and throughout, and now after 60 infusions or 66, I forget, visits to Indianapolis for an infusion for all participants. This was going on in 4 countries around the world. So there were 1,100 of us total volunteers in this study. But after visit 66, it became what they call open label, and everybody got the drug, whether or not they'd been getting the placebo or the drug before. It was a double-blind study. And so the people there
did you know if you were placebo, or did
no,
they
I did not. Never did know, and I won't learn that. But there was never any effect. I think after when it changed to open label, I think my wife expected my ears to turn green or something, but they didn't, and there was no change. I felt nothing throughout the study, and I to answer Daryl's question, I think probably the only way to know for someone like me would be with a PET scan, because Solanezumab was designed to halt the progression of plaque in the brain. So
right.
if there was no progression, I guess you would deem that a success.
Wait, so did they give you a PET scan afterwards? I mean, do they give you that information saying, congratulations, there's no more plaque, or what?
No, they did not, and that would be probably my one criticism of the trial. That it seems I would have liked to have known throughout. Yeah, I know that they did PET
Absolutely.
scans 2 or 3 times during the course of those 7 years, and I would have liked to have known if there was any change, physical change in my brain, which PET scan would have revealed.
Did you try to ask? Because they obviously know, right? Because they gave you PET scans after you were done with the trial.
I I I asked at the time, but I have not asked since, and I don't know how much. I don't know how much information they get at the test site as far as the results.
Yeah, I do think it's put into a central depository somewhere. We've heard this.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's my feeling too.
yeah. But still, I think that's important to know, right? It's like if you're on this drug, you have the right to know whether or not it worked or not in terms of taking away the biomarker.
Well, I would have liked to know that too,
Yeah.
but that didn't happen.
Okay, so now I'm assuming this was how many years ago now that you completed the trial?
The trial was terminated last March of 2023, about a year ago.
Are you still taking the drug, or no? It was terminated because
No, it was terminated.
yeah. So that means that it did not pass clinical trial stage 3, and it was just withdrawn then.
That's correct.
Yeah. So do you know why it was terminated?
Well, all I know is what they said, and they said their primary and secondary endpoints were not met, and so I don't know if there was some benefit gained by some people or not, but I know that the people that at the test site where I went, which was just one site, there were only 6 of us at that site out of 1,100, but they were uh, uh, they were optimistic that it was going to be successful.
Mm.
And I think the people at Lilly were cautiously optimistic. That's what I was told. So that's all I know. And then when it's announced that it's a failure, that's just kind of the end of everything.
So, but since then, there have been two FDA-approved monoclonal antibody drugs, aducanumab branded Aduhelm, and then lecanemab, which is Leqembi under the brand name Leqembi. Would
Yes.
you have you talked to your doctor about those drugs? I mean, because they're in principle, they work the same way, in terms of monoclonal antibody therapies.
Um, no, I have not talked to the doctors about that. I would, I know that Lilly is expecting this donanemab to be approved, and I was told that they may be coming out with a trial on a donanemab type drug for people like me that have no diagnosis or symptoms.
And you feel like you don't feel any symptoms today. Like you feel like you're healthy and still the same, right? You're not
I do,
experiencing
yes.
that's and how old are you now? Can I ask?
I'm 77.
Okay. Wow. So that's great. I mean, that's that you have a familial history. Did you know, Bill, if you had a genetic link, did you ever get your genetics, your DNA?
I
Um,
have not done that unless that was done as part of the study that I wasn't told, and I don't think it was. That would be the only case, and I'm pretty sure that I have not had that test.
So, what is your whole looking back on your whole experience? What are some things that people should know who may be considering going into trials?
Well, I guess my advice would be to do your own research. I think a lot of people, their very first reaction is, "Oh, don't do that. There's side effects." They're scared of what they don't know, and most of those side effects have been mitigated before the drug trial ever comes out. But there are some things, but uh, know what you're dealing with before you say no, and the final decision is yours, of course. So,
Did you have any experience any side effects while you were going through the trial?
none whatsoever,
So
start to finish.
you
Not
would
a
have
single
your
one.
infusion and then they would look, you'd have to stay there so that they could really see how you were doing for an hour or so, and then you'd walk away feeling absolutely fine.
Absolutely fine. Yes. And after the first couple of years, I didn't even stay. As soon as the infusion was over, I was out of there.
Okay. And you weren't tired or anything like that?
Nothing.
Yeah,
Nothing.
that's
Yeah.
what was the process of infusion like? This is a question that comes up because a lot of people are afraid of infusions. I think they would prefer much more to take a pill, but tell me a little bit about the whole process for you.
Well, they have an infusion center at the neuroscience center, and it's very efficient. The phlebotomists there are really good. They don't stab around on you trying to find your veins. I don't think they ever missed one of mine, but it's well done. They're professional. They check on you during that hour. The phlebotomist will come in and make sure that the machine is working properly. But it's the typical hang the bag, and it's a drip infusion, and it takes an hour. Um, when the A4, this is called the A4 study. When the A4 study started, it was 400 milliliters, and then later on it jumped to 800, and then finally to 1600 milliliters, and all three of them still took an hour to infuse. And it's the typical needle in the artery at your elbow, and other than the little prick of the needle, which was not much, that's about all you feel.
How did you find out about the trial in the first place?
Well, at the end of that TV show, there was the solicitation, and it referenced the National Agency on Aging. And there was some contact information there. So I went to the National Agency on Aging and did a little digging there on their website and found this A4 study of Lilly's, discovered that the only test site in Indiana was in Indianapolis, and there was some contact information there. So I probably I watched that show I think it was in June of 2015, and probably in August or about that time, I started making some inquiries, and there were some phone calls, a couple phone calls and a couple emails before I was able to make a hard contact with the people in Indy. But then it was pretty routine after that. After I told them my history, they invited me in for the screening process, and that's how it went. It was not difficult.
So, Bill, I just have to ask you, like, do you pay attention to lifestyle factors for prevention? Like, tell us a little bit about, I know you were an Army veteran and then you were a business owner, and you've worked, you're probably, I'm assuming you're retired now.
I am.
So tell us a little bit, like, do you take lifestyle things really seriously, or do you stick to a, diet, sleep, whatever? Enlighten us a little bit in that area.
My wife and I we try to eat healthily. We've done that for years. We have a big garden in summertime and all that stuff. We try to exercise. A couple of years ago, we got electric assist bikes. We've ridden over 3,000 miles on them.
Wow!
And so we love doing that, and we keep our minds active. We read, we play puzzles, and do games from time to time, and try to do all the things you're supposed to do. Try not to be stupid on the things you're not supposed to be.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Bill, for sharing your experience. It really, we get so many questions from people who don't really know what to make of the MAB trials, right? So, what better way to talk about it than with someone who has had that firsthand experience? So we so appreciate you really being open and sharing with us.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and thank you for all you do at Being Patient. You're a blessing to a lot of people out there seeking information.
Thank you, Bill. We really appreciate it. If you have any questions for Bill that you didn't get to ask, please send them to us. We'll make sure to pass them along. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. That's where you hear about talks like these. Thanks, everyone, for watching, and thank you so much, Bill. We'll see you next time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. For more information on upcoming interviews, don't forget to sign up for our newsletter at beingpatient.com. That's beingpatient.com. And send us any feedback you may have, whether it's someone you want us to interview or any comment about our podcast series. You can do so by emailing info@beingpatient.com. Thanks for listening, everyone. I'm Deborah Kahn.